Good afternoon, guys. So welcome to the first day of me being away. If you guys don't know, I am actually out of the country for the next 2 weeks. So this first week of classes, I'm just going to have some pre-recorded lessons for you guys. So just like what we're doing today. I think one of the days I'll also have a YouTube video for you. So we definitely still have lessons going on this week. I'm just not around. If you do need to get in touch with me, you can email me. I should have Wi-Fi. I just can't promise you how quickly I'll answer. Okay, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you need help or anything. You can definitely still send me an email or send me a Teams message. I just can't promise you that I'm going to answer it the same day or right away. But you guys shouldn't have anything too urgent to worry about while I'm gone. I am giving you guys a new assignment, okay, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute, but I just want to let you know that I've decided to give you guys 2 weeks to work on it, okay? So you'll have the full time that I'm away to work on this assignment. It's not a really hard assignment. It's all things that we're going to go over in these video lessons this week. Okay, it's sort of like an introductory assignment to the new topic, which, as you can see here, is going to be fractions. Okay, so it's not a hard assignment, but it is a little bit long. It's a couple of pages. So I'll let you guys work on it this week as well as next week. Okay, and I'm sure you all know by now that next week is actually going to be our reading week. So that means that there are no classes. So you don't have to come to school. In fact, I think the campuses will actually be closed. Okay, so you can use that week to sort of catch up on any assignments that you've been missing out on. Work on your mathletics if there's anything on there you haven't finished. Things like that. It's just sort of a good time for you to get caught up and sort of regroup and spend some family time over Thanksgiving, things like that. Okay, so like I said, we do have that assignment, so I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay, so obviously our next topic is going to be fractions. So your first assignment for fractions looks like this. Okay, so I said it is a little bit of a longer assignment. It's a couple of pages here. We have a couple of questions about shading in fractions, things like that. Naming fractions. I know that the scan isn't perfect here, but you should be able to sort of see what's going on. Okay, so like I said, a couple of pages, and then it finishes off with adding fractions. So the only reason it's really so long is because of all these diagrams we have here. So there really aren't that many questions. It's just that each question takes up quite a bit of space. Okay, so that assignment will be due when you come back from reading week. Okay, so you'll have a little over 2 weeks to work on it. It'll be due the Monday that we all get back. Okay, so that's what that looks like. I don't have it posted as of right now just because I'm obviously recording these in advance and I didn't want to confuse you guys by having an extra assignment posted. So it will be posted when you're watching this video. Okay. I think I will also have a mathletics assignment, probably 2 as usual for you guys. I just haven't figured out which 2 as of right now, but make sure you check in the usual spots. So if you go under our OneNote here, if you go to assignments, okay, I'll have a new posting here. It'll say assignment 4. That's where you'll find that written assignment I just showed you. And then there'll also be a little section that will say mathletics for this week, which I think is October 7th to whatever it is, okay? Again, with the mathletics, I'll probably give you 2 weeks to do it, but don't necessarily wait until the end of those 2 weeks to work on it because you don't want to fall behind, okay? Sorry, I'm also recording these lessons while I have a cold, so if I start coughing or sneezing or anything like that, my apologies to you guys, okay? So one last thing before we actually get into today's lesson. I should have your tests marked, so the ones that you guys wrote on Thursday. So those should be marked, and so if you want to see how you did on that, you just go under your name on OneNote, so find your name here. Just use this as an example, okay? Find your name here, go under the quizzes tab, and then you'll see, I think I called it Unit 1 test. If you click on that, you'll see a copy of your test with all of your marks, okay? So you can see where you did really well or where you might need improvement. And again, if you have any questions about that, if you think that maybe I marked something wrong or I added up your marks wrong, get in touch with me. Like I said, send me an email or a Teams message and I will get back to you at some point. I just can't promise you it'll be same day. Okay, that long spiel is over. Now let's actually get into what we're going to be talking about, okay? So our new unit that we're going to be starting is fractions, okay? And I know that a lot of people are intimidated by fractions. I know that when I first started learning them, I was intimidated by them as well. I didn't understand them, and I just didn't like them, okay? I want you guys to see that fractions really aren't that difficult. They're not scary. We can really make sense of them, and they don't have to be this big, intimidating thing. Okay, so let's just sort of do a slow introduction to them and start kind of understanding what they are and why we use them. So fractions allow us to split things into smaller, equal-sized amounts. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be talking about, the first type of fractions that we're going to be talking about are proper fractions. Okay, so proper fractions represent parts of a whole number or object. So with a proper fraction, your top number is always going to be smaller than the bottom number, okay? So let's look at what a fraction looks like, right? So say we had something like 3/4, okay? So I'm sure you've seen something written like this before. You've seen fractions before, okay? So this top number here, and my arrow is not perfect, but this top number here is what we call the numerator, okay? So the top number is always called the numerator, and that number represents the number of equal parts you have. Okay, so we'll sort of use an example to explain that a little bit more, but just keep that definition in mind, okay? Our bottom number is called the denominator. Okay, so the bottom number here, our 4 here, would be the denominator, and that number represents the total number of equal parts in a whole. Okay, so again, we use an example to sort of make more sense of those definitions. But another thing I do want to point out to you guys, this line here that separates our denominator and our numerator, okay, the line that you draw in a fraction, all that line means is divided by. Okay, so if you think of fractions like that, they're actually a lot less scary, okay? Fractions are really just a nice way for us to write ugly numbers. Okay, let me prove that to you. So let's just use our fraction as an example. So we had 3/4. Okay, if we know that this line here means divided by, okay, then this fraction really is just representing 3 divided by 4. Okay, it's a little bit less scary when you think about it like that, right? The reason that we write it as our fraction form is if you do this 3 divided by 4, you get a number like this. You get a decimal, okay? You get 0.75. Now that's not such an ugly number. That's actually a pretty nice decimal to work with, okay? But you can see it is just a little bit nicer to write it in the fraction. When you get into numbers that look a little bit uglier, so let me think of a better one. So let's say that we had let me scroll down so you can see it, 5/6. Okay, so again, we know that this line that separates our numerator, so remember this is our numerator and this is our denominator, okay? And we know that this line that separates them just means divided by, okay? So if we can rewrite this, right? So we have 5/6, so we know that's the same as 5 divided by 6, okay? Now if you type 5 divided by 6 into your calculator, you're going to see that we get this really ugly number. So we get this really long number. It just sort of repeats forever. You get 0.833333, and the 3's just go on, presumably forever, okay? It's probably infinite digits, okay? So you can see that when we have numbers like this, it makes a lot more sense to just write them in this nice fraction form here, okay? Because 5/6 looks a lot nicer. It takes a lot less time for us to write. It's sort of like a simplified version of this big ugly number here. Okay, so just remember that fractions are really just non-ideal numbers. Okay, fractions are just a way for us to do calculations with numbers that aren't so nice to deal with on their own. Okay, so that's sort of an aside there. We'll get into it a little bit more when we're talking about adding and subtracting and stuff, but like I said, for now we just want to do sort of a slow introduction. Okay, so we have our numerator, we have our denominator, and we know that the line that we draw between them just means divided by. Okay, so when we're talking about proper fractions, so remember proper fractions are the first type that we're going to deal with. The numerator, so our top number, is always smaller than or equal to the denominator. Okay, remember the denominator is our bottom number. Okay, so you're always going to have some smaller number over some bigger number. Okay, so pizza is a really good way of visualizing fractions, right? Because pizza is something I can almost guarantee we've all had, and pizza is something that we take one thing and we divide it into different equal sized sections, okay? So if we check out these diagrams here, you can see that, let's look at our first pizza here, okay? Our first pizza is divided into these sections. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, okay? We have 6 sections altogether, okay? Of these 6 sections, 2 of them, so 1 and 2, actually have pizza, okay? And all of our sections are equally sized. Let's relate that to our definition of numerator and denominator, okay? So remember that numerator, as we said above, represents the number of equal parts that we have. Okay, so if we think about this pizza, what do we have? We have 2 pieces of pizza, right? 2 of our 6 sections are filled with pizza, okay? So 2 in this instance is going to be our numerator, okay? It represents the number of pieces of pizza that we actually have, okay? The denominator is our total number of equal parts in a whole, okay? So total number of equal parts in a whole. If we look at our pizza here, we have 6 equal parts, right? It was divided into 6 equal slices, okay? And when the pizza was full, right, before these other 4 were eaten, we had 6 equal pieces, okay? So our total number of equal pieces of pizza was 6, okay? So just like that, we've made a fraction, right? We have 2 pieces of pizza and we had 6, okay? So we just get 2 over 6. Right? I'm just going to switch colors for this next one and see if it shows up a little bit better on the picture, okay? So let's look at this middle one here. So again, if we count up all of our sections, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts, okay? So we had, when the pizza was full, we had 6 equal parts. So again, our denominator for this pizza is going to be 6, okay? It's split into 6 equal parts, okay? That's the total number of slices that we had. Our numerator is going to be the number of equal parts that we actually have, okay? So looking at this middle example, how many pieces of pizza do we actually have? Well, we only have this one, right? All of the other ones are gone. Presumably they've been eaten or whatever it is. So we have 1 out of 6 pieces of pizza, okay? So just like that, we made a fraction to represent this pizza, okay? So 1 over 6. Let's do the same thing with this last example here, okay? So again, first thing we want to do, let's figure out our denominator. So the way we're going to do that is just by counting our total number of sections, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 altogether, okay? That's our total number of pieces, okay? Our numerator is going to represent number of equal parts that we actually have, okay? So in this example, what we'd ask ourselves is, how many pieces of pizza do I actually have? Okay, so if I count those up, I have 1, 2, and 3. So I actually have 3. So my numerator, is going to be 3, and my total fraction is going to be 3 over 6. Okay, so you can see when we're using pictures like this, it's really easy to visualize fractions. It's really easy to understand why we write them the way that we write them, and it's really easy to sort of translate from a visual picture of a fraction to writing the actual fraction itself. Okay, so I have a couple of examples here. So these ones aren't filled in, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shade them in, okay? So for example, let me just shade in this first little section here. Okay, so let's pretend that that's all nicely colored in, okay? I want to write a fraction that represents this shape, okay? So if I want to represent a fraction and I'm saying that based on the shaded parts, okay, I want to first write down my denominator, okay? The denominator is the easiest part because it's just the number of equal parts that we have in total, right? So if I want to find my denominator, just like we were doing with the pizzas, I want to count all of the sections that I have. So I have 1, 2, and 3 sections that this shape is divided into, okay? I'm not worried about the shading in this first part, right? To figure out the denominator, all I'm concerned about is how many sections I actually have in front of me, okay? So there's 1, 2, 3 is going to be our denominator, okay? Now to figure out my numerator, I just want to ask myself, how many of my 3 sections are actually shaded in. Okay, so if I look at my picture here, I can see I just have one of my sections shaded in. Okay, so 1 is going to be my numerator. Okay, so remember, numerator, we want to get used to using these terms, okay? And this is our denominator. Okay, so similar words, they both end with ater, but different beginnings there, okay? So numerator and denominator. Okay, so let's try another example here. So I'm going to fill in, let's see, make this bigger, maybe that'll make it easier. So I'm going to fill in this one, and then I'll fill in this one as well. Okay, so again, first thing we can do here is let's figure out our denominator. Okay, so let's try and figure out our denominator first. So if we remember that denominator is just the number of equal parts that we have in total. Okay, so when I'm figuring out my denominator, I'm not worried about what's shaded in and what isn't. All I want to know is how many equal parts I have in total. So if I count these all up, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. Okay, so my circle here is divided into 4 equal sections. So 4 is going to be my denominator. Okay, it's going to be my bottom number. Now what I want to do to figure out my numerator is figure out how many of my 4 equal parts are shaded in. Okay, so if I count the ones that are shaded in, I have 1 and 2. Okay, so 2 is going to be my numerator. Okay, so this shape can be represented by the fraction 2 over 4. So if we wanted to write this in a sentence, we could say 2 of my 4 equal sections are shaded. Okay, that's really all of our fraction is representing. Okay. All right, let's try and do some more examples here. Okay, so these ones are a little bit nicer because they're already shaded in, so I don't have to do a shoddy coloring in job for you guys, all right? So this question is asking, what fraction of these equal sized shapes have been shaded? Okay, so this is very similar to the types of questions that are on your assignment. Right? And again, these aren't really difficult questions. They're visual, okay? So I know personally I'm a visual learner, so I find these types of questions really helpful in understanding. Hopefully you guys do as well. So let's figure out how to do this question. So we can approach it the same way we were doing with all of our other ones. Okay, so let's figure out our denominator first. So remember, denominator is the bottom number. Okay, so with this first shape here, what we want to do is figure out our denominator, and remember that our denominator represents the total number of equal parts that we have. Okay, so we're not worried about what's shaded and what's not. We just want to figure out how many little sections is our shape divided into. Okay, so if we count them, we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this square or rectangle, whatever it is divided into 3 sections. So that's going to be our denominator. Okay. Now, if we want to figure out the numerator, this is where we're worried about the shading, okay? So figuring out the numerator, we want to know what fraction of these equal size shapes have been shaded, okay? So all we want to know is how many of our sections are shaded in, okay? So if we look back at our picture here, we can see just this first section here is shaded in, okay? These other 2 are not, so that means 1 out of 3 of our equal sections are shaded in, okay? Now this is where we have to be careful when we're doing questions, okay? So if you look at the wording of this question, it says what fraction of these equal size shapes have been shaded, okay? If the question had asked us instead, what fraction of these equal size shapes are not shaded, okay, that would change our answer, right? If we were doing this question based on the number of sections that are not shaded, right? Let's look at our first one here, the one that we just did, okay? If it was asking us for what had not been shaded, our answer would be different, right? Our denominator wouldn't change, okay? We still have 3 equal sections to begin with, okay? So that's consistent. What does change is our numerator, okay? If we're focusing on what sections are not shaded, then all of a sudden we see that we have 1, 2 that are not shaded, okay? So our numerator in that case would become 2, okay? So that's why it's important to really pay attention to what the question is asking you, okay? Because your answer may or may not be different depending on whether they're asking you for what fraction has been shaded or what fraction is not shaded, okay? Generally, and I think that this is true for the assignment that I've given you guys, it will almost always be based on the number of sections that are shaded, okay? So they're not going to try and trick you in that way. But I know mathletics can be a little bit tricky sometimes. They like to throw in things like that just to make you think a little bit harder. So when you're doing mathletics, make sure you're paying attention to what the question's really asking, okay? So let's try and do letter B here, okay? Move on to B. So again, first thing we want to figure out when we're doing this is our denominator, okay? Denominator is the easiest to figure out. We're not worried about what's shaded and what's not. All we want to do is count up the number of equal sections that we have. Okay, so if we look at this circle, let's just count our sections. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so this circle is divided into 8 equal sections. So that's going to be our denominator. Okay, now just to make it more obvious, let's switch colors here. Now we want to figure out our numerator. Okay, so figure out our numerator. We remember that that represents the number of equal parts that we actually have, okay? So in this case, it's going to represent the number of equal parts, so the number of our 8 parts that are actually shaded in. Okay, so let's try and number our shaded in parts. So we have 1 here, we have a second one here, a third one here, a fourth one here, and then a fifth one here, okay? So all in all, 5 of our 8 equal sections are shaded in. So 5 is going to be our numerator, okay? So this fraction here, this 5 over 8, just means 5 of our 8 equal size sections, are shaded in. Okay? It's really as simple as that, okay? So we'll do this last one here. So if we look at letter C, okay, this is kind of a funky looking shape. This is a rhombus, okay? So it's sort of a rectangle, but with some different angles, right? Okay, so this shape here, again, we're always going to start these the same way. So first thing we should try and figure it out is a denominator. Okay, so to figure out our denominator, we just want to know how many sections is our shape divided into. So if we count them up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal size shapes. Okay, so our denominator for this one is going to be 4. Okay, now we want to figure out, and remember what the question is asking you, what fraction of these equal size sections have been shaded? Okay, so we want to count how many of these 4 sections are shaded in. So let's just switch colors here. So we have 1 shaded in one here, we have a second shaded in section here, and then a third shaded in section there. Okay, so if we count those up, 1, 2, 3, we have 3 sections that are shaded in, so that's going to be our numerator. Okay, so the fraction that represents this shape is going to be 3 over 4, and all that means is that 3 of our 4 equal sections are shaded in. Okay, we have more examples of this, but I think that we'll finish those up tomorrow. Okay, so as for right now, you guys can take a look at your assignment. Okay, you can start trying some of the problems. Again, mathletics, there will be assignments for that. I'm just not sure what ones they will be, but just check under the assignments folder under the mathletics section for this week, and it will tell you which ones you need to finish. Okay, and if you do have any questions, reach out to me. Again, can't promise you a really quick answer, but I will eventually answer you. Okay, and just another reminder that you do have 2 weeks for your assignment, so don't stress too much about it. I don't want you guys to be stressing about school over your holiday next week or over Thanksgiving weekend. But with that being said, don't leave it till the very end of your break. Okay, do these assignments, do these questions while the math is still fresh in your head, and it'll be a lot easier for you to do it. Okay, and then when I do get back, and when we all get back after reading week, we will go over the stuff that we did while I'm away. Okay, so just sort of a refresher for everyone after that long break. But again, my recommendation is to try the assignment when it's still fresh in your head. Don't leave it for the day before we all get back and then find yourself scrambling because you can't remember the lessons. Okay. All right, so we'll continue with this tomorrow.